thank you very much for joining us, dear Pilar, Anthony, I see Michelle, all members of Parliament, regulators, and our members. We are really proud to continue this tradition. I think this is the 7th edition of the EIF GSMA Roundtable. Special thanks to Ruta from our team and Maria Rosa and the EIF team to put it together. This is a special one because this is a hybrid one. We don't have a lot of people here in the room. I have Laszlo on my side, and people has to be in masks. And then there's another camera. So we have Jasmine and Robert for the Maltese NRA. I don't know if you can show them, Jose, in the room. And we were supposed to have Rainer and Victor Negrescu. So Rainer, the Liechtenstein NRA, and Victor Negrescu, the MEP. And Stephen Tuss is in Barcelona, but he's in another room. So anyway, this is kind of a special way to do this. We're really hoping that next February we can see everybody in person. And also, it feels good to be, the title for us in this event, if I think some of you were here and went back, is back to business. So it feels good to back to business a little bit. So we are really waiting for this to come back on a normal scale in the coming months. And I was moderating some of the panels the couple of days ago, and then let me share the same thing I told there, that it's been 15 months I haven't traveled for business, and it looked really uncomfortable to come here and overcome all these hurdles. But once I was here and I could meet my peers and have a normal human conversation, I think it's worth all the effort. So I just would like to advise you that it looks very comfortable, but from here it looks like a cage I was in for the last 15 months. Anyway, what is more interesting, I think, is it's a global event. So there was, we had the ministerial program for 2 days, a lot of discussions. And of course, it was all around the pandemic. And I just wanted to share a couple of takeaways with you very shortly, because maybe that's interesting. The one is so there's a global recognition that the time has come and the time is now. So for all policymakers, regulators, politicians, ministers, everyone thinks that, now this is the time when everybody looks at the same direction. So there's no more need to convince any prime minister or president that this is important. So now, globally, the time has come to make things happen. The other takeaway, of course, there is still a lot to do. So there's, still a very big usage gap, and there's still a lot of, debate around how to do things around, regulation, investment, return on investment, and so on. My third takeaway, I think, which goes to our discussion, really, the third one is all about if now this is the moment and there's a lot to do, it can only be done in partnership. So it was a lot of, somebody said, this is the time to walk the walk, not only talk the talk. So, and this, I think this partnership, what you represent here in this call or in this event is truly important about how policymakers, regulators, and industry can come together to make this happen. And Mr. Negrescu has arrived in the meantime, so we are one more. Welcome, Mr. Negrescu. And the last but not least is, since this is a European event in the global event, and this is, I think, for most of you, less for us as an industry, that I think your responsibility as policymakers and regulators is, I see here, as even bigger than it looks like. It's not only European, because all in the global conversations, Europe comes up, and everybody's looking at Europe of how to pave the way for new policies and new regulations. So I think this is really interesting. So with this, I think it's a really good segue to give Pilar the floor when I talked about responsibility. These very good memories coming back when I have to give you the floor, even like 15 years ago in Strasbourg, when you were with Trotman and Malcolm Harbour, and we were the three, at that time, ERG heads, and talking about how, how the review should look like. So I think, I think all, as a European citizen as well, but somebody working here, we owe you a lot of respect of what you have done in the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years for this. So all the respect here from Barcelona. And with this, I would like to give you the floor. Thank you, Pilar.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. I must say that also, if I'm back to that time, 15 years ago, with the review of the regulatory framework at that time, the first review. Recently, we had another one with the code, but that was years of really hard work, learning, and a very good cooperation with so many, and with you in particular as well. So let me say good morning. First of all, welcome back to the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. I feel really happy for that. And in addition, it gives us the opportunity to hold our traditional EIF GSMA event. Much has happened since our last joint venture back in February 2019. All of us witnessed and participated of the increased need for communication services, tools for remote collaboration, and fast and reliable access to data. Connectivity has been the thread that has sustained the digital technologies and in turn have made possible to fully fulfill in some way many of our needs during the worst part of the crisis. The pandemic is a sort of magnifying glasses that shows the need to accelerate our digitalization process. So we must move up a gear. Consequently, we are much more now aware that we must be forward-looking, prioritize, and deploy policy actions. I must insist in the fact that connectivity is a precondition to become part of the gigabyte society, because it is a precondition to industry's capacity to innovate and in manufacturing, for example, and to transform energy use patterns through smart meters, efficient lighting, and distributed software, and to better respond to patients' needs by providing greater data-enabled decisions and foster preventive measures. And in general terms, it is a precondition to improve our well-being through smarter communications, education, transport, or security. And today, with 5G deployment, we are taking a quantitative leap, and it is an entire ecosystem of technologies that will benefit. In order to truly transform 5G into commercial use, governments and regulators must play their part and implement policies that encourage advanced technologies to be applied across all economic sectors. The fact that there is a rapid progress in digital technologies is not a warranty that these tech breakthroughs will be deployed. Operators in many countries face obligations and constraints that can slow down investment in mobile networks. To advance the mobile ecosystem and the digital economy overall, we should strive as much as possible to limit the regulatory load to what is strictly necessary. But it's not only about not regulating. There are a number of key areas where forward-facing policies and regulations are particularly crucial. In that sense, administrators at all levels can take steps to facilitate network deployment by simplifying and standardizing planning procedures and regulation for site acquisition, collocation and upgrades of base stations and small cells, and adopting policies that reduce costs for mobile operators while spurring investment. In addition, we need a spectrum policy for 5G. Operators require access to sufficient radio spectrum in suitable frequencies. However, public administration must avoid artificial inflating 5G spectrum prices by, for example, setting high auction reserve prices that are not related to the alternative use of the spectrum. In this regard, let me stress from a purely EU perspective that it is difficult to understand the implementation delay of the electronic communication code in some member states. Dear friends, the path to a digital society requires we continue to work hard beyond the adequate regulation, fostering the adequate skills of the population, investing in research and ensuring levels of security and standard will be, with all these elements, they will be paramount to advance to a digital society. I must say that many of the challenges that we will have to face are yet unknown to us. This will require a digital forward-looking approach and a strong leadership to digital policy making. And this also requires global efforts and coordination. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pilar. Now I have the duty to introduce Magnus Franklin, Managing Director of Teneo. And if I was talking about veterans and past, I think many of us misses Magnus's reporting on telecom and digital issues, but now he's helping clients and he will help us to navigate through this these sessions. So Magnus, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and delighted to be here. I'm particularly happy that you chose around 2008 as the reference point earlier, because that's when I arrived in Brussels many moons ago to report on the telecom package. So it feels like we've come full circle in many ways, and great to see so much institutional memory in this room to discuss the future here today. So I'm going to moderate this, and as we all know, with the virtual settings, it's full of unexpected situations and so on. But I really, this should be a forum for all of you to exchange, to try to do the networking and exchange of views that we would do otherwise in a real setting. So we have a couple of tools at our disposal. What we're going to do is have a scene setter from our two panels and the speakers to set out their stall, and then we'll go into Q&A. But to kind of guide the Q&A, we're going to have a person called Paolo, who's sitting with us, who is live drawing. There we go. You can see it on the screen now. Live drawing the discussion as we go along. So after the scene setters, we'll put that on the screen for you to reflect a bit on the landscape that's been presented. Hopefully provide some additional food for thought, questions, etc. And you can always tap into his and watch him live as he goes about drawing our discussion. If you focus on that window. So we'll have that as an aid. We'll also, of course, invite you all to ask questions. I want to have in a sense, a question-led discussion after the scene setters. So we have a room in Barcelona, which we'll take some questions from. We have you online. Some people might be more comfortable writing a question, in which case, put it into the chat. I would really encourage it, because I think then it makes it easier to sequence questions, etc., and make sure that the question is clear. Some of you prefer to do it live, in which case just raise your hand, and I will pick up your question as we go along in the Q&A. Unfortunately, we are under time constraints, so I'm going to try to keep this compact. So don't worry if we don't immediately get your question. We'll try to get around to as many as possible. But that's in a sense the setup that we have before us. And if you have any other questions on technical level or whatnot, type them into the chat. We can get around to it as soon as we can. And just by way of introduction, thank you, Daniel. So I'm a managing director at Teneo, which is a consultancy in Brussels focused on strategy and policy, public affairs. But indeed, up until about 3 years ago, I was reporting on all these things, telecoms, digital, and everything in between at a news agency called MLEX, which led me to know many of you very well over that decade. So I'm delighted to see so many familiar faces in this room. So without further ado, we're going to have a first session on the targets for 2030, the famous digital compass that the Commission has set out. And Anthony Whelan will give us the scene setter in a moment on what those targets look like and where we're heading. But there are many elements of that we'd like to then tap into with Susana Solis Perez, member of the European Parliament from the Renew Group, Axel Voss, member of the European Parliament from the EPP Group in Germany, and Cristian Silviu Busoy, also from the EPP Group in Romania, who will animate what Whelan will set out. And we'll be talking about things like skills, secure infrastructure, digital transformation of businesses, including SMEs, digitalization, public service, and how these different goals will combine with the Next Generation EU package, the recovery from the crisis that we've just gone through, and hopefully are exiting soon. And in a sense, building Europe's profile as a digital powerhouse in the coming decade. Things like digital sovereignty, strategic autonomy, of course, come into that as well. But you're not here to hear from me, you're here to hear from Anthony. So without further ado, Anthony, I'd like to give you the floor, and then we'll go through the other panelists. Please.
Great. Thanks a lot, Magnus, and good morning, everyone. I was not yet around in 2008, but I have had the pleasure of working with many of the people on this and the next panel, and have always greatly appreciated the constructive approach, which we will certainly need as we head into Europe's digital decade, as the President dubbed it in her State of the Union speech last year. Maybe I just pick up something apart from the fact that I'm always happy to be with the EIF, and I'm very happy to be on an event that marks the return of Mobile World Congress in its sort of hybrid format. What Daniel was saying about the difficulties in breaking out, as it were, from the habits of confinement made me think of a fairly compelling example of how Europe can do digital well if we're all rowing in the same direction, which is the European Digital COVID Certificate. It's a model not only of alignment of interest and very fast-track legislation, where both Council and Parliament, I think, added value to what we were doing and what we had proposed, but also what I think a lot of the naysayers did not believe would happen is that already before the entry into force of the system, which is on the 1st of July, so tomorrow, already more than 20 of our member states have preemptively activated it. So they are issuing certificates, they are verifying certificates, and they are running the system via the EU gateway that was prepared in a privacy-friendly way for that purpose. So in the space of less than 6 months since this became a political topic, Europe has delivered a major digitalization of public service, which I believe will greatly serve citizen interests and shows also to the world what we are capable of in terms of driving a standard or a technical specification that can become a reference also for the globe. Now, pulling out from that and looking at the digital compass that we set out, we identified 4 cardinal points that I think people broadly agree on: the need for skills, the need for secure and capable infrastructures in the widest sense. Obviously, communications networks are still right at the base of that pyramid, but we go up into, let us say, data infrastructures as well, digitalization of businesses, digitalization of public services. How do we take it forward? Drawing on the example I just cited, the most important thing is first to agree on the needs. As Daniel said, everyone now agrees that digital transformation is important, but you need to focus on certain things. The specific targets we have identified are based, I think, on a mix of driving socioeconomic take-up on a couple of key parameters, on addressing very central strategic dependencies, which we have also looked at in our recent update of the industry strategy, and issues of what I would call social equity, namely the spread of digital transformation, its availability and accessibility to all. One of the ways we believe we can get cohesion around these objectives is by bringing member states and the European Parliament together to endorse both the targets and a system for delivery of monitoring and delivery on them, which will be a digital policy program to be proposed in the autumn, which those who remember the 2008 review on the spectrum policy program will perhaps recognize a bit of their DNA in as well as an idea. What we believe we need to do is get a common dashboard of how we're doing on these targets across Europe, get a common level of commitment to them by public actors, and also therefore establish them as a rallying point for business and civil society actors, with roadmaps, with clarity on the direction that we are going, which also, of course, is very important for investors. Now, in that, regulation is, of course, important. Regulation is important to give clarity and legal security on certain things. If we take something like AI, our proposal on AI is designed to avoid fragmentation in the European market and to ease acceptability of a major technology. But of course, regulation only delivers part of the story. You need to accompany it with measures to drive take-up, investment, relevant skills, and that's where issues such as, or opportunities such as the national plans under Next Generation EU come up, where the digital priorities match very well the four cardinal points that I mentioned. Equally, if we take something like data, regulation is important in order to create legal security on the exchange of what I would call this horizontal good. But you also need data infrastructures, you need investment in the most energy efficient distributed handling of data, which is secure and which can also be, if the market opportunity is taken up, also, of course, as it were, the home market for European innovation in this area. Following that up with things such as our policy on standardization, putting tools in the hands of member states and businesses, such as projects of common interest, multi-country projects, industry alliances to bring together the most important actors and try to establish also a common vision of industry with public actors on the best strategy to go forward, and much more, but we said we'd stick to 5 minutes, so I'll stop there. Thanks.
Oh, there we go. Mute went off. Thank you, Anthony, digital advisor to Ursula von der Leyen, and clearly having a big influence on how the EU is setting its targets and the path to them. I think we will get to some reactions, some thoughts on how this is going, and then Anthony, you can come back and address them in the Q&A later on. But please, Susana Solis Perez from Renew Spain, please share us your thoughts.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation to this panel. I have to say, on Monday, I had the opportunity to attend physically again the Mobile World Congress. It was fantastic to see that the Congress come back to Barcelona, which means that the pandemic is almost over, and how much digital technologies like 5G, AI, and big data have advanced since the last edition I was there. As you said before, the time for a successful digital transformation is now. Indeed, Europe's recovery and competitiveness depends on how fast we are able to achieve the digital transformation of our society and our economy. I will always say we have to build back better. And this is why we fully support the Commission's approach for the digital decade targets. And this is my first point. the level of ambitions is very high, but we cannot aim any lower. And I agree on the needs, as Anthony said, because if we want to become globally competitive and ensure our strategic autonomy, we have to reach the goals we have set ourselves. And for that, we need very strong commitments and more cooperation among regulators, policymakers, governments, and industry. As you said before, we have to work in partnership. And that takes me to my second point. These targets will need huge amounts of investments, both public and private. Gigabit connectivity and 5G are very capital intensive, and we have to massively invest in digital infrastructures. The right side is that we have now a unique opportunity with next generation funds, which should not be seen as a simple economic stimulus, but a historic opportunity to correct our weaknesses and reposition Europe as a leader competing with China and USA. The institutions were clear as to the priorities of these funds. At least 20% of the funds have to be dedicated to the digital transition. But we need to make sure now that member states deliver, that the national recovery plans deliver. And that's why we should ask ourselves, are the national recovery plans ambitious enough to meet the digital decade targets? Are ambitious enough to guarantee the rapid deployment and uptake of the 5G technology or the connectivity in rural areas? Because I am concerned. According to a recent published report, despite of the funds, there remains some important gaps in the field of digital infrastructure, and they believe that national recovery plans will not get us there alone. I think there is still much to be done. That's why we need a policy framework that allows us to attract much more private investments. And this brings me to my third point. We have the ambition, we have the funds, and now we need to back it with sound legal framework. The digital transition needs an enabling legal framework that respects our European values and principles, but does not over-regulate or hamper innovation. And this balance in regulation is what we are striving for in the EU right now. We are seeing it in key pieces of legislation like artificial intelligence or the creation of the European data space. And on top of that, this legal framework should also take into account the increasing digital divide in Europe and in the rural areas. Around 30% of EU's population live outside the cities, and we have to provide people living in rural areas with the same opportunities as one who live in big cities. In this sense, we need to clarify stated rules to guarantee the connectivity of rural areas, because at the moment, private investors are still reluctant to invest in 5G. It is a clear case of market failure. But we should not forget other instruments to promote connectivity. We have the structural funds, the Connecting European Facility, the Commission's proposal of a mechanism to facilitate the launch of multi-country projects, and all these instruments need to be able to interact among them. That's why I believe it is so important to promote synergies between them. And of course, as Anthony mentioned, we need a robust governance mechanisms with clear milestones and a monitoring system. I like this dashboard that Anthony mentioned before, because without clear indicators, we cannot monitor progress. And finally, the most important point, investing in people. Investing in infrastructure will not be enough if our society cannot or does not know how to keep up with the change that technology brings. We need to invest in skills and modernize our education and training systems. And of course, we need to promote more women in STEM studies, because today we women are still seriously underrepresented. So when we look back in some years, we need to be able to say that the digital transformation benefited everyone. It will only be successful if they are inclusive. It is the only way forward. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Susana, for that perspective from the Spanish liberal family, I guess. We'll continue the tour de table, and the next up is Axel Voss, member of the European Parliament from Germany and the EPP Group. Please. I think you need to unmute, or if we, yeah. Perfect.
Sorry. thanks a lot, Magnus, and also thanks a lot for the invitation to this event. And so it's always an honor also to speak here for this event. And it's more than less a kind of so Daniel in the beginning also already mentioned that now every politician is aware that we need digitalization. And this is somehow, yes, it's a positive signal, but also a kind of a shame that we are now, because of the pandemic, having the idea of digital transformation, and this has to be stepped up. And so, but if we are looking to the parliament, we are already working on these for a lot of years. And now the member states, it seems that they are joining or try to join. So what we need, of course, as a kind of a precondition for digital issues, and this has been mentioned, it's infrastructure, connectivity, broadband, 5G, 6G, edge computing, quantum computing, etc. We need data. And also, let me say also something, digital transformation is not just a kind of, oh yes, we are transforming these step by step in a way. We have to have in mind that this is already a question of global competition. And therefore we need the framework, we need also the speed of everything. And this is how we are lacking so far, and we are behind other regions in the world, because we are doing what we are always doing, taking our time, discussing, being politically fragmented, and so on. And this is not helpful for the competition, and this means also for prosperity, wealth, and our way of life here in Europe. So this is why I'm missing at first, and Pilar mentioned this already, political leadership. Yes, we are doing here something and there's something, but we do not have a kind of a real plan. We do not have a strategic where we have this idea of prioritizing and then investing a lot. What we are now offering of investments is nothing compared what we should do to be more in the lead of everything. We have the knowledge or some experts in place, but we are not able to transfer this to business models and to have prosperity also on this side. So this is where I would say this lack of political leadership, and I do not mean always only the European level. I think also in this dimension of member states, and our national leaders are not able any longer to join forces. So we need, from my perspective, joining forces. We need European projects to be a good competitor to the rest, to the world. So if everyone is doing something on its own, then probably we are not competing a lot to the rest of the world. So that's why I think we need to step up with these ideas, with these structures, with this transformation. And beside infrastructure, data, cybersecurity, we need these patents and copyright issues, ethical questions, definitions, research and developments, investments, and then, of course, the political will, standardization. And why do we need our American partners to remind us, oh yes, we can do here kind of an EU-US tech partnership? Why we haven't done this before already? So that's why I think we are lacking here a lot, and we need to step up and have a lot of developments in parallel, not to being too much behind. And this is then also coming to the infrastructure of our democratic structures. Also there, I know we are politically fragmented. This is always a kind of a time-consuming issue already. But If we are doing everything how we are this always doing, then we are not a kind of a good legislator to our industry any longer. So if we are taking, let's say, 10 years for the data, general data protection regulation, or now AI, we will take another 3 years or whatever, then the development is already a step further. And we are also once again behind. So we have to think also about our structures, our democratic structures, and how to be a kind of sending out guidelines in the forefront before we are then have a kind of a detailed regulation in place. So this is what I'm criticizing. We are taking too much time for something what's already is on the agenda. And here I think we need also, if we are coming to data, Susanna already mentioned also this one, data is not only an aspect for fundamental rights, it is already an aspect of competition. In a data-driven world, and if you would like to be a part of it, then you can't say, oh, no, we can't use data at all. No, we have also to rethink about our data policy, if you want so. But if we are not doing this, yes, we can lean back, sit other and looking to others who are developing more and more business models. And so also here we have to think differently. Data are not only a question of a fundamental right and protection, it's already a competition and competition issue. And therefore also we have to strive the balance better regarding protecting privacy and having innovation and developments. So not to be too long, but this is my general approach on this digital decade. So even so, I'm praising the Commission for doing this, but also thinking in decades in the digital world is probably not the right step forward. Therefore, I also would like to urge everyone, we need to be more speedy.
Excellent, Axel. Thanks for setting that out and some food for thought, I think, that will drive the discussion. And I appreciate the plural of the use of data. You said data are rather than data is, which warms my former journalist heart very nicely. So we started in Brussels, we went to Spain, we've gone through Germany, now we'll go to the other end of Europe. Cristian Silviu Busoy, member of the parliament from Romania and the EPP group. Please take the floor.
Thank you so much, and very honored to be part of this very interesting discussion. Sorry for not being able to be in Barcelona. For the committee that I'm chairing, where I'm the president, Industry, Research and Energy Committee, ITRE Committee, this discussion is extremely important and relevant. And of course, the question, what will it take to reach Europe's digital decade targets, is a question that we discussed several times in ITRE Committee with different representatives of European Commission, but also with a lot of experts and with the member states when presidency took over. But because the digital Europe is at the core of the transformation that the Union has set to achieve, and the leadership worldwide into turning digital will be a key factor in the geopolitical context, as those who set the standards today are those who will have a leverage on international markets tomorrow. Europe needs to make itself fit for its digital decade targets, as it has to be fit for 55 target by 2030. We have these two important medium and long-term strategic goals, and we have to work hard in order to reach our targets by 2030. We need to see the 2030 as being a double challenge to meet, the green and the digital challenge, in order to make the transition. Yet Europe still lacks a comprehensive and mainstream policy that will also include digital into the industrial policy. And we would like to see more clear and, of course, more feasible ideas in the new industrial policy related to digital. We also are very much concentrated in ITRE committee on having a balanced approach and focus on a lot of the competitiveness of the European industry. We like to see more jobs, take care of our energy security supply, and of course, boost the digitalization of our societies. We want action to be taken in addition to what member states are doing in order to restart the economies. We have very ambitious goals and we are advancing fast on this agenda. For many years, one of the main challenges of the Union was to stimulate economic growth, ensuring global competitiveness, while of course making the green transition. Yet deep transformation of our industrial sectors is what we need, and one that fosters digitalization, innovation and new technologies such as 5G, while protecting intellectual property and reducing the carbon footprint to reach also the climate target, as I said, as well. In order to maintain the global competitiveness of European industry, many current shortcomings, such as over-dependency on international supply chains, insufficient investment levels, widening productivity and innovation gaps, and skills shortages, even in the digital area, and I hope you agree with me, must be addressed. Two key elements of the digital transformation of European unions represent the way we see the role of industry and also proper investment. It should make clear for everyone, and we should maybe explain better to our citizens that digitalization and new technologies will change our lives and enable solutions to many of the challenges we are facing. For example, our ability to collect, storage, and process data by artificial intelligence algorithms will increase efficiency and productivity and strengthen overall competitiveness of the Union, and not only in the digital sector or industrial sector. EU can also benefit of digital transformation in order to maximize industrial performance by combining its technological and industrial capabilities in a coordinated manner and further develop and update the digital infrastructure across member states. For that, in European Parliament, we fought and made sure that EU instruments such Connecting Europe Facility and Digital Europe receive adequate funding, and a lot of opportunity will arise from this. Also, to innovate, we have at our disposal Horizon Europe, and you know that there the digital pillar is extremely strong. And it was mentioned by my two colleagues, members of European Parliament, Madam Solis Perez and Mr. Vos, that we will have many opportunities which will come for each member state, and especially countries like my country, Romania, Central East European countries, Southern countries, from RRF, from Resilience Recovery Facility, and also cohesion funds. We could use cohesion funds in order to improve our digital infrastructure around EU. We only need to make sure that these instruments will be implemented and member states will benefit of all synergies between all financial resources in order to make the double transition. We are also working in European Parliament to improve the legislation. Of course, DMA, DSA, I highly debated. I also believe that it should be improved. The text proposed by European Commission should be improved. I'm advocating for a balanced approach. Also, of course, we have the roaming legislation revision, and I believe that we should concentrate more on a faster implementation of 5G and start really creating the right incentives for artificial intelligence investments in European Union. We need an European agenda on how to increase Europe's strategic digital autonomy by determining flagship areas. High volumes of data will require inevitable measures to ensure data sovereignty and will enable European Union to become a major global hub for data, opening up also other important opportunities. EU digital agenda need to focus efforts on strategic sectors in order to try to become leader or at least improve our position in the global competition, to focus efforts in fields such as manufacturing, robotics, trade, health, and creative industries. Finally, I believe that in securing our lead in tackling climate change, we need also to work towards climate innovation, but also digitization. And this will help us to remain competitive and assuring growth. I can assure you, as the chair of Committee for Industry, Research and Energy, that my personal and also my colleagues' long-term commitment is to achieving the ambitious targets on climate policies with a complete and coherent digital transformation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Christian, and also for bringing in that green angle, which I think is going to be on Anthony's mind as much as a digital one. We can get to that in a second. We're going to transfer towards a Q&A. So I want to bring up Paolo's work, say visualizing where we've gotten to so far, as a bit of food for thought, as a bit of inspiration for questions. And I think, let's just see if I can bring it up a bit. There we go. Yeah, so we have lots of the themes that we touched on in various of the interventions: innovation, connectivity, digitalization, but also the social equity part, the skills agenda, the investment in people, not just infrastructure, and the regulation as a kind of anchoring point for all of this as we head towards a data-driven world. And I think it sets it out nicely. So thanks, Paolo, for doing a very nice visual, I have to say, in a very short space of time. Our next panel, we'll have Eva Kaili, a member of the European Parliament from the S&D Group in Greece, Bart Groothuis from Renew and the Netherlands, Michiel van Bellingen, who's the chairman of the Belgian telecoms regulator and BEREC chair this year, and Ben Reschner, the chief economist and head of public affairs of Vodafone, who will be discussing the role of 5G connectivity in driving Europe's economic recovery and growth in the aftermath of COVID, and how Europe can become more competitive. A bit what we talked about before, but in a more specific connectivity, telecoms, and mobile sector related way. And really, how do we accelerate 5G deployment in Europe? And maybe, Ben, I'll allow you, when you get the floor, to maybe address what Anthony just said about the case for 5G. I'm sure that will be interesting to hear from you as a member of the sector. But without further ado, Eva Kaili, if you're with us, you can take the floor. Is Eva there? If not, all right. We'll give Eva a second to join us. So yeah, we'll start with Bart Groothuis from the European Parliament, please.
Thanks. Thank you for giving me the floor, and I'll try to make some brief remarks on how the political discourse in Brussels is developing around 5G, as many things are crossing our path right now. So let me first say that I think that 5G is part of the nerve system of our future societies. That's the first thing I'd like to say. It's not just technology, it's also a political, strategic, and also a military playing ground. We have to think about it differently than we did in 4G. As virtualization layers, I was director for cybersecurity for 7 years at the Dutch Ministry of Defense, and I've intensively studied 5G and its risks. But I don't just want to say it's risky. It's risky business. There's a huge potential here. But first, we should touch on some of the risks, because technology has become part of politics. It's become part of geopolitics. Where in the old days, we used to have geography defining what is geopolitical, interesting, and relevant, like the Himalaya between India and China, two completely separate civilizations. And now the Chinese can actually be in vital infrastructures around the world, not hindered by any geographical boundaries. it's a new way of thinking. So I think that many politicians should involve and get involved in technologies, make sure that we understand that, and we make sure that we get our values in that. And I'd like to discuss exactly that. Let me first just also start on making 5G very small, because this might seem a very big theme I just grasped, but it's also very local. Everything is decentralizing, right? Data is decentralizing, its analytics is on the edge. 5G is in that sphere, but energy production is in that sphere. I think that we could solve traffic jams, and as it all decentralizes and makes and becomes more local, it could give a huge boost to local economies and regions if they would say we want to be the first, if they say we want to solve traffic jams around our big cities because we want to profit from it and make sure we are more interested, that many companies are interested in settling in our industry. So municipalities, local governments, they can, if they move fast and first, they can really benefit from 5G and its development. And I'm not sure if everyone sees that. People talk about smart cities, but it's much, much more. And I think the potentials in local politicians, as I see it, in my party, for example, in the Netherlands, one of the most connected and most digital societies in the world, it's very moderate what local politicians see in the potential of 5G. They know something about it, but I think that we can do more about it. Now, then I think that now back to the subject of 5G and how we look at it in Brussels. I think that, of course, the supply chain. Let's talk about the supply chain. The 5G toolbox that the Commission has set forward is a great example. I'm a rapporteur on the cybersecurity legislation in Europe, and I've tried to endorse the copying of the 5G toolbox supply chain review into that directive. Right? We are trying to make sure that the supply chain review in 5G is copied for airports, for ports, for harbors, for facial recognition. That we want to make sure that we have like-minded countries dealing with the technology, because there's huge risk, not just in 5G, but it's a broader term. So 5G has enabled us, our thinking in Europe in a more broader term. I'm able to transport that thinking into the NIS, the Networks and Information Security Directive, which I'm rapporteur of, and I'm very grateful for that. And now Open RAN comes along. That's very interesting. Another commission is saying, what should we do with it? Because we had two world champions, Nokia and Ericsson, and now we are engaging with many others if we are virtualizing that software layer. And now what do we do? And there's huge supply chain risks there as well, but especially from the Japanese and from the Americans. And how do we deal with that? And personnel is coming over the floor to reach into the core of your networks. And how do we deal with that counterintelligence threat, with that? And I see there's two ways that we are looking at it. First, it's a huge benefit for competition, because anyone can access it, also small companies. And then we have the security point of view there as well. And I'm worried about some protectionistic views on this one, that we use it for protectionism. And I want to make sure that we don't do it. The last remark, Magnus, if we want to make 5G a success, and if historians want to see the way we handle this period, this time period in 5G and managing it politically as a success, then we have to now engage in 6G, its successor, because many of the standards in 5G have already been set. Okay, Open RAN, we can still discuss, but the new standards in 6G, that's what I find interesting. And then Nokia and Ericsson have a specific responsibility in Europe. That's how I see it. If they become champion, I think we want to make them become a champion, and we give them funds through Horizon 2020 and other benefits, then fine. But other European nations have to profit. I think that we have to make sure that other universities are involved, that ecosystems, knowledge, research and development is spread across Europe, and that we make sure that we don't just grasp how we make money, but also how we actually build these systems. And not outsource it to India, but make sure that we as Europeans know it, that we have the knowledge, that we have the best nerds in the best sense of that word to develop our own technology in future. Because that is what we're working towards, to make sure that we are more digitally sovereign. And that is what I'm trying to do here and support that big movement as well. And I'd like to conclude with that, Magnus. Back to you. And if there's any questions, I'll be answering them later with pleasure. Now.
sure there will be lots of questions. Thank you, Bart. I think you tap into a lot of the thoughts that are currently swirling around in all our minds. But I appreciate the fact that you started with the frame that a lot of the people that deal with this won't necessarily be sitting in these discussions or have a view on the security, 5G, etc. So I think it's important to remind us that there's a world out there as well outside this meeting room that we might have to start at a basic level with. But without further ado, I'd like to move on to, I see Eva Carly is just joining, which is fantastic news. Let's just see if the audio works. Hi, Eva, are you with us? Let's check if we can hear you, okay? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I cannot see you yet, but I'm working on it.
Okay. Maybe while Eva gets set up and gets all the tech working, we can then hear from Michel Mombellian from the BIPT and BEREC perspective on what's on your mind.
Thank you very much, Magnus, and hello everybody, and thanks to the European Internet Forum for this invitation. I'm very honored to be here with you today on behalf of BEREC. And for BEREC, a key policy objective, if not the key policy objective for the coming 5 years, is promoting full connectivity in line with the European regulatory framework. This means prioritizing work that improves the general conditions for the expansion and take-up of secure, competitive and reliable, very high capacity networks, both fixed and mobile, across Europe, while ensuring a smooth transition from legacy infrastructure. And 5G, of course, is a topic that BEREC will keep monitoring actively and closely as the market develops. We focus on issues related to 5G, such as coverage indicators or EMF, but also what I should call the less visible aspects, such as backhaul and copper switch off, which is important too. So over the past years, BEREC has identified many aspects of regulation that are involved in the 5G ecosystem. And this work has resulted in several reports ranging from infrastructure sharing to the role of regulation in enabling the 5G ecosystem. And last year, finally, at the end of the year, BEREC published a report that contained an overview of a regulatory issue that we anticipate related to 5G services called the 5G Radar. And this BEREC 5G Radar and the accompanying guides seek to help national regulatory authorities to anticipate the issues involved, support the pace of innovation to be optimized, and ensure proper steps are taken on time by taking into consideration developments in the market. I cannot speak on behalf of the Commission. Anthony is there for that, but I think that the Commission is very clear about what needs to be done to recover our society, accelerate fiber deployment and the rollouts of 5G networks as well. And I think that in 10 years' time from now, we will all acknowledge that this COVID pandemic and the Next Generation EU Fund have played an impressive role in promoting a boom in supply and demand for digital and technological goods and services. However, we all know that to mobilize investments, we talk about huge investments, both in fixed and mobile, you need an efficient system. You need harmonized rules in Europe. And all those investments in gigabit networks will happen in backdrop of the European Electronic Communications Code that kicked into effect half a year ago. Well, I can assure you that on behalf of BEREC, that BEREC will do its utmost and is still doing its utmost to ensure that our overall objective of a consistent application of the European regulatory framework in the field of electronic communications is reached. And as a matter of fact, you probably know that we published our final set of guidelines stemming from this code, and this one regarding broadband mapping, and just a few weeks ago. And overall, BEREC issued over dozens of sets of guidelines aiming to ensure this consistent approach on the implementation on the code. And maybe I'd like to mention the main changes. Well, this code has also changed the role of national and international regulators, because I see that we are moving away from the very clear-cut concept of a principle-based regulation based on competition law, and we are moving now towards a regulatory framework with additional pieces of soft law, such as the Commission recommendations, the connectivity toolbox, BEREC guidelines, and an overall focus on sustainability. And all this will have an effect on promoting full connectivity over the European Union. I already mentioned the connectivity toolbox, but we are anticipating also the review of the broadband cost reduction directive. Anthony mentioned this as well, to be an additional instrument to fostering the rollout of networks, and we provided an opinion on this as well. And finally, another key driver of innovation in investment is the state of the network infrastructure. And this is also linked to the geography and the population density in the member states. Because in the past, regulators were mainly concerned about fostering innovation through the so-called ladder of investment. Whereas now they have a broader concern on societal needs, which requires additional elements of industrial policy and a green focus as well to be considered. And in the backdrop of this pandemic, this additional societal layer has even increased more actually. And this will, of course, also have an impact on the way we, as regulator, will look at the market in the coming years. I will stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Magnus.
Excellent, Michel, and much to react to there. I'm sure Ben will hopefully go at the end and give us some industry views on all of this. I'm just going to check if Eva is online and with us and ready to bring her contribution. Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Welcome to the floor, Eva.
Thank you so much, and I'm very happy to be with you and among good friends that they work hard on this digital agenda. So let me say that I think it's very important to discuss about how Europe now can increase its infrastructures for the digital age, since we are all facing these challenges of the pandemic, and we understand how connectivity was crucial in order to respond to this pandemic. It demonstrated the central role of digital technologies in the economy, but also in our daily lives. So I believe that since we had to deal with extra traffic, we remember that we couldn't have teleworking possibilities. We didn't have very stable connectivity to do business, or for e-learning and education online, also for important social activities from streaming or even gaming. To video calls and discussions and telemeetings, even to be able to trace the spread of COVID and analyze big data in order to be able to come into conclusions on how to respond to the pandemic through artificial intelligence systems. I think we realized that telecommunications, networks and connectivity are more vital than ever. And I see, Bart, with us that we have been keeping very high on our agenda the cybersecurity, that I think it's really essential for the deployment of 5G. in order to have also resilient hybrid broadband communications. I would like to say that since the Commission requested actually that we will have a certification SIM and also for 5G networks to address all the risks that could be related to technical vulnerabilities of the networks and further enhance their cybersecurity, we've seen that we are working in parallel on several files in order to achieve that. So for the deployment, I think what's really important is to understand that basically for the deployment of any technology, we have to be able to make sure that we'll have a cybersecurity SIM there to make sure it's deployed in a safe way for citizens. The fifth generation of telecommunication systems, once it's deployed, because now I see a lot of discussion on 5G, but we realize it's just like a very enhanced 4G. I think it would be very wise if we have a strategy on how to be deployed. So if it's going to be corridors, because for the proximity reason, because it needs to be every 50 meters, I think it's more realistic to talk about corridors of 5G and start discussing the 6G. Even now, connectivity. I think we have to have this strategy to unlock the potential of these technologies, especially where its value would be at the maximum, and it will have the impact to achieve all these expectations up to 2 trillion of incremental gross output between 21 and 25, it's being mentioned. And on the same period, we expect to create and transform 20 million jobs across all sectors. So I think this is a foundational technology that could enable also other technologies in their convergence across all the value chain, from chipset makers to infrastructure developers. And it could also unlock new products, new services, even new businesses based on this high bandwidth IoT and ultra low latency capabilities. I know that also Breton mentioned that security is at the core of the 5G technology rollout. I would say the same, since we are also conducting studies on how it can be safely deployed and address all the concerns that are being raised. But at the same time, we will have the EU 5G toolbox that would support all these efforts to optimize the security. On the funding, just let me say, because I don't think I have much time, it would be better to have a discussion, that the Commission and the Member States, they have identified that 5G is a key area for investments for the recovery and the resilience facility. Of course, how could it not? After the pandemic, I think our priorities maybe changed a lot. And it has allocated a significant share of its 150 billion digital budget to finance the 5G network infrastructure. And EIB has already funded a lot of 5G projects across Europe. So I think it could play a role also to our sovereignty and competitiveness. There is a geopolitical dimension. I don't know if we should mention now our concerns, but I think it's really important to make sure that we will have safe software and hardware developments, and we will make sure that Europe will have control of not just the infrastructure, but also of the metadata that someone can have access to if they are a provider of this network. So I think in order to have, the safety also for citizens, it's really essential to, let's say, to talk about the European sovereignty in deployment of 5G, and also to make sure we can have our sphere of influence beyond our EU borders to the MENA region, I would suggest, in order also to take the maximum of this valuable deployment of this network. Finally, I would say that we need to urgently invest in the pan-European high-speed connectivity and also infrastructure, and we need to increase the funding for quality networks. So these funding opportunities should also come perhaps to support with measures that could support low-income families in order to be able to participate. We have to take this under consideration because it's really an expensive technology. technology. So we have to see also who will have to pay for that, who will take this cost. And member states should also be encouraged to award 5G spectrum frequencies to secure a timely deployment of high capacity network. I think there should be a central authority that would make sure that it's deployed in a proper manner and a safe way, and also to ensure effective and transparent processes that would permit the accelerated rollout of the very high capacity infrastructures. I think that would be my initial comments. I'm sorry if I took more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva, and lots of, again, food for thought. And Ben, you've had your fill now of political and regulatory, etc. Ideas of what should be happening, and particularly on this panel from 5G, the post-pandemic world, through cybersecurity and 6G. So you have a lot to cover off, but I mean, I'll let you set out your stall first, and then we can get to questions and a more discussion format afterwards. Please, Ben.
Thank you, Magnus, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a little bit daunting to go after so many distinguished speakers and such a variety of views, but actually a lot of common views, but still some subtle differences nonetheless. So yeah, let me just give an operator perspective. Hopefully I do talk on behalf of a number of operators. I can't guarantee that I do, but then I give the Vodafone perspective, but also where I think a lot of the industry is aligned. First, I mean, we're talking about 5G connectivity. So the first thing I'd like to stress, and I think this did come up in a couple of interventions, is that it's not just a next generation in terms of bandwidth. The important thing is to distinguish between 5G and other technologies in terms of what we see as three fundamental additions. It's the ability to slice, so having separate parts of the network dedicated for specific uses, the latency, the low latency, giving different applications, and also the integration of edge cloud, so bringing cloud much closer to the end user. And these are fundamentally different capabilities which will drive new use cases and really be part of Industry 4.0. And I think this is part of what this panel is meant to be about, how 5G can drive the economic recovery. Industry 4.0 is going to be a really important part of that. And when we think about the data analytics as well, as being referred to by quite a few people, new capabilities on network, new capabilities on data analytics, you put it all together, it is a very big opportunity. Of course, there's risk, but also a massive opportunity to accelerate our industrial progress in Europe and beyond, obviously. But when we look at it, I do want to bring in the perspective of what we've actually gone through in the last 18 months or so. We've already seen a massive acceleration of digitalization. So we're talking about accelerating digitalization. It's already happening. It's all around us. It's what we're doing today by being on this panel virtually, and also some people lucky enough to be in Barcelona. It has accelerated already. But now when you put that combined acceleration with the change in the way industry will be functioning, I think it was Bart who referred to this as the nervous system of the entire industry, and everyone has agreed digital infrastructure is absolutely critical to this. We get the combination of a new way of doing industry and accelerated digitalization. For us, this means major disruption. So disruption can be positive, but disruption can also be negative. And just being prepared for disruption, probably in a way that we weren't prepared for the disruption that we've been through in the last 18 months, but now being prepared for the new disruption is going to be critical to make sure that we have a success of 5G, but also, as I said, Industry 4.0. And so how do we handle that disruption? And for us, we're trying to learn from the lessons of what we've been through in the past 18 months. And the specific thing is, yes, digitalization has been a lifeline. I think it was Susana Solis Perez who referred to it as sort of or maybe it was Pilar, I can't remember, who referred to it as a thread that kept everything together during the pandemic. But it also exposed some of the divides. We have to be honest about this. Connectivity, digital more broadly, can be a force for good, can be a force for bad. And if we don't address the divides, it won't be the inclusive digital society that is part of as Vodafone, as our company, that's part of our purpose. So for us looking forward, in order to make the most out of 5G connectivity, which will underpin Industry 4.0, we have to also address the divides that have been exposed during the last 18 months. And I think Anthony referred to it in terms of the cardinal points of digital compass. There's different ways of looking at divides. We just look at three simple things: people, SMEs, and regions. In people, it's about digital skills, and Victor Negrescu was very strong on the need for digital skills. We have to make sure that as Europeans, we are enabled for the digital acceleration, and the Industry 4.0 is about to come about us. SMEs must be part of that. We have to give every company the opportunity to grow and to be from a SME to a major corporate, and it's regions. We must make sure that we don't have the infrastructure gaps that we currently have. And this is all of those, three of those is where policy can play a fundamental role in closing those gaps and making sure we get the full value from what is about to hit us. And I mean, I feel a bit jealous now of Eva Kalli's intervention, where she referred to an opportunity of 2 trillion euros and 20 million jobs, because we did some research, which, if I remember the numbers correctly, was 1 trillion euros and 7 million jobs if we get the digitalization right. Either way, I think we'll take 1 trillion or 2 trillion, given the payback that would imply for the Recovery and Resilience Facility of 750 billion euros. That would be a good return on investment. So we're looking for an inclusive Industry 4.0 as much as an inclusive digital society, and making sure we have the policies to support this. And I've got just 2 final points. How do we make this happen? So the first thing is the level of collaboration. And I think if you listen to the speeches today or the interventions today, the level of collaboration in terms of vision is absolutely there between industry, government, and also with regulators, with Michel, with his intervention. But I would say we all need to go hand in hand in terms of this collaboration. And I do think that at a national level, especially, some of the regulation is not quite there yet. We still see elements of old school thinking. And if I would slightly change the words of Michel, you talked about doing work on copper switch off. I'd like you to do work on regulatory switch off as well. That could also bring quite a lot of impetus into the acceleration of deployment of infrastructure. Because Magnus, you asked about the environment for us to invest. We have to be really honest here. We made an announcement in our last results that we would expand our investment in Europe, and we got hammered by the markets, if I'm perfectly honest. So we have to ask ourselves, have we got the right environment now where the market believes we can invest with confidence because it would add value? And this is where my last point, time is critical. There is a lot of money going around now, and it's superb that the Commission has the combination of the long-term vision of 2030 targets and the financial muscle now to make some of this happen. But the funds in themselves are not enough. Again, Susanna Solis-Perez referred to some of the gaps, which I think is a report that we commissioned from Deloitte, which shows that the funds will not be enough. So we need to make sure that every euro of public money is matched by private money, but every euro of private money gets the biggest bang for the buck. And that means policy reform, not by 2030, not by 2025. As I think it's to Axel Voss's point, speed is absolutely of the essence. We need to get this right now. We need to make sure that the money that we are dedicating to investing in 5G and investing in all infrastructure really delivers the value which will give the digital dividend to the European citizens. Because if we don't do it now, Industry 4.0 will come upon us. It will be there, but there'll be others that benefit from it. So we need to make sure we got the combination of everyone working in tandem. And I think from what I've heard today, there's a lot of thinking in tandem. The time is of the essence. We need to make sure that we do crowd in that private investment. So we get 5G connectivity everywhere, fiber everywhere, and really we then become the nervous system for a very, very buoyant, and I hope it is the 2 trillion, not the 1 trillion of value that will yield to Europeans.
Thanks, Ben. And I think your point on biggest bang for the buck will be something we can pick up with the other panelists in a moment. And as a reminder, if you want to look at what we've been talking about so far, Paolo's lovely graphic is there. You should be able to blow it up on full screen if you just press the 3 buttons in the corner and hit pin. It should come up full screen. This virtual panel has been fantastic, and I let you take all those thoughts back and do some interesting policy work in your various fields. So thank you very much, and on behalf of Daniel and Pilar and the rest of the team, I'll leave you to get on with the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Magnus.